Most plant advice starts with the plants, but in my opinion, that's backwards. Your plant, if it's struggling, isn't reacting to the care necessarily, it's reacting to your home. And the moment that you stop and think of your house the same way that your plant might do, that's when things really start clicking into place. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So think about it this way, why does the same plant thrive in this location, whilst if I move this plant to this location, it will struggle? That's one thing to keep in mind. Or also, why a specifically easy plant might not do particularly well in your care. And you're just like, but everybody says that this plant is easy. Why am I struggling with it? So the first thing I want you to do is start walking around your space and looking at your space or your home or the locations that you've got plants the way that a plant would look at them. And this is key as well, because we're all kind of looking at some of these elements, and a really good example of this would be a lot of people going, but this plant said that it's okay for low light. I've put it in low light, because your eyes are telling you that that is a low light location. But actually, if you take something like your phone and you've got like a light meter reader app and you put it in that location, you're just like, oh, it's not low light, it's no light. Start looking at things the way that your plant might be experiencing the space. And do all of this before you start blaming the struggles that you might be having with a plant on the plant itself, because it might just be that the plant is reacting to where you have got it in your space. But let's flip the perspective, shall we? And the first thing I want you to do is stop starting with the plant. So don't start with a plant in terms of what you have heard that that plant is going to need in terms of its care. So for example, a luxurians crossed with radicans here. So, and this was an interesting purchase that I did recently actually. This was 3 plants. I've got 3 luxurians X radicans. I know. I've downsized. I've probably got rid of, and I'm still in the process this bank holiday weekend because I'm filming this on the Easter Sunday actually. I've probably already got rid of about 20 odd plants, and I've probably got another 10 to 20 to go. And some of these plants are big as well, so. But I will show and tell all when I do the next plant tour. But did I need a new plant? No. But I found this and it was very big. Like it was in a very big pot. And I found essentially what was 3 plants in one pot for like 12 great British pounds. And I'm just like, I don't need you, but you are coming home with me. And I was fully intending to keep everything in the one pot. And I've got some interesting new kind of testing some new net pots. But by the time I got them home and unpotted, I'm just like, oh no, every single one of you is going to need your own pot. But anyway, neither here nor there. Tangent. Stay on point, Memo. So it's not just me looking at this plant and just going, okay, I know what care you need, so I'm going to need to put you here. It's just like, okay, what spaces have I got around my house which would fit into what this is expecting to get? That's what I mean about flip the concept around on its head. So instead of me putting you here, where I know you might struggle because you're going to get much more direct light, I will put you a bit further down on the shelf, which is where this lives, because I know you get slightly more diffuse light. Because I have found with any plant, any anthurium that has got luxuriance on it, if I give it too bright of a light, it stresses it out a bit too much. So that's the one thing that you need to start thinking of, is flip that concept around in your head first. The next thing, and I'm going to keep holding this because it's an easy one for me to kind of showcase what I mean by this. The next thing is you need to start altering the way that you think of light. So, and I know this is a big topic, and I know that a lot of us struggle with this at the best of times, but light realistically isn't just low or high, whilst I'm getting blinded by the light coming through the clouds at the moment. Oh, editing Memo is going to have so much fun with this video. But this is one of those things that you need to remember, not just high or low light, but you need to remember distance from windows or distance from something like a grow light. There's a grow light here, by the way. Distance from a grow light, that is going to signify kind of the light levels. The other thing you're going to need to remember is start looking, especially if you're doing this on windows, start looking at your window, know the directionality of your window to see what kind of level of light you're going to get. So that's the first thing that hopefully most of us have got better at doing. But the other thing is, how far from the window do I need to have it? Do I need to have something in front of it? Does the window need to have like a net curtain? All of these things are going to play a part. The other element of that is the amount of daylight hours. So, for instance, if I'm putting this in a window that's kind of south facing but pulled right back, like maybe 2 meters back, and it's got a net curtain, it's no longer a bright window, it's a bright indirect window. But at the same time, I need to remember of the seasonal changes. Again, remember how your plant is experiencing the space that you're putting it in. So something that could have worked at this distance, same window, in the summer, in the winter, because there's less daylight hours and there's probably less sun because you might have clouds, you need to move it closer. The next thing I need you to start thinking of is microclimates within your space. Think of the microclimates within your space. So if something is working, this is such a bad example, but I'll see if I can find a video and put it here. If something is working in a location where there's a whole bunch of other plants, but maybe you're struggling a bit because it needs slightly higher humidity, because a lot of people just like group plants together and the humidity will rise. How many plants are you grouping together, and is there enough evaporation happening from a lot of those different plants to signify enough of a jump up in humidity that will make a difference to that plant? So sometimes grouping is a good first step, but grouping with enough plants to raise the humidity enough for a consistent layer of time is important as well. Conversely, I'm not going to sit there and put, if I've got a bathroom that is constantly steamed up, if I had like a big family home and there was multiple people living in a home and we all had the one bathroom and it was constantly being used for showers, baths, all of these things, that room is constantly, or at least for a very large chunk of the day, staying super humid. So even if I have got a south-facing window, so bright lights that we were talking about before, I should not be putting a cactus or a succulent in that space, because even though the light is good, the humidity is going to be way too high for a plant that is used to growing in arid conditions. Oh, and the next one is one of my favorite topics, airflow. Remember your airflow. So again, granted, I've got fans constantly blowing on here. That's why you can see a lot of the leaves that are shaking and moving. That is because there is air circulation happening within this space. I know, before you say so, not everybody's a crazy plant person, or at least to the level that I am within their house. I get it. You're not going to constantly be having fans. It might not be suitable, especially in the colder months of the year. However, airflow is important. So if you can't have moving air around your plants, and potentially it's a plant that needs to be, say it's an aroid or specifically an epiphyte, something like a net pot will be your friend, or a pot that does have some holes in it. You don't necessarily need to have a net pot, or something like a terracotta pot that can sweat out, in essence, some of that moisture would also help. Now, in terms of movement, it is one of those things that people forget, and I'll bring up a garden example that a lot of people don't always make the connection. A lot of the times, if you talk to kind of established and kind of long-term gardeners, they will always tell you that actually you need to give some support to young trees, but not to the level where they are fully immobile, even if there's a storm happening. You do want the trees to have some sway, or the plants to have some sway, because what that does is it signals, stress signals, but good stress signals in the long run. It signals to the plant down below in the roots that, you know what, you need to anchor yourself stronger into the soil, because if you're constantly having to deal with high winds, that root system is going to be extra important. Rather than just pulling up some of that moisture and nutrients from the soil, it is very much holding the plant into whatever media it is growing. Usually if it's in a garden, it's going to be into soil. So there is some of that we need to start bringing into our concept of houseplants. Sometimes a bit of movement is a good thing. I'm not even going to touch on the factor of pests here as well, because if you've got enough movement going around, it's less easy for pests to kind of establish themselves on your plant. It's not impossible. It's not impossible, but it is something that will make their lives difficult. And we're all here to make pest lives difficult, aren't we? But, and that's the other thing as well. You need to remember that there is a caveat to that as well. Again, thinking about how your plant is seeing the space. So, a plant that I might have by my front entrance, the door to the house, very, very close. I've got the Pachira aquatica right there, and I can usually tell that there's two things that stress it out, because my door has got a frosted window on it, so it gets enough light in the winter. Super, super happy. In the summer, that light's a bit too bright because my front door is south facing to the house, so sometimes that light is a bit too bright in the summer, so there's a light issue there. The wind or the air circulation issue there happens in the winter, not in the summer, because obviously doors open and close in the summer, that's fine. You get a bit of that summer breeze coming through or just hot air. But guess what happens in the winter to that plant? It's slightly stressed out, because every time I go in and out of this house and it's -1, -2, -3 degrees outside, especially in the depths of winter. And I know for all my Canadian viewers that they're laughing all the way to the bank. It's about as cold as it gets here. I know it gets colder for you guys. But yeah, that is going to cause issues to the plant, because they're getting blasted all of the time with cold, cold air. So it's not just the air that you need to consider there, it is the temperature. So you can see what you might think is just, oh, it's great, it's getting like loads of air circulation, especially if you're buying this plant in spring and summer and you're placing it there and you're just like, oh, winter, 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 yes, winter, winter. I need to remember that that lovely warm breeze that it's going to potentially get every time the door closes and opens in the summer is going to be the opposite in the winter. So bear that in mind. And again, starting to see some of those spaces in your home as a habitat for your plants and what might be working or not working. And I'm not saying you're going to be able to control all of this. I'm just giving you tips on what you need to start paying attention to. And let's touch on humidity, because a lot of people will always go on about humidity, especially when it comes to plants and where you're putting them in the house. And there's a lot of things that you're always going to be heard of, like, yes, group them together. See, what I was talking about before, is the group big enough to create enough of a difference in the humidity for that plant. So I'll give you a very real world example. If I was to put an anthurium like this one and group it somewhere in my house where it's very dry conditions most of the time, so I'll give you a specific figure. Say my house has 20% humidity as a baseline. So I'm living somewhere really, really like arid. And I've grouped this with 5 other plants. Is that humidity from those 5 other plants going to be enough to bump the humidity that this plant is expecting to be super happy, 50, 60, 70%, by just those 5 plants? You're expecting a lot from those 5 plants to go from 20% humidity and create a microclimate that goes up to 70. That's a 50% jump in humidity in that microclimate. Not saying that it's not possible. I'm just saying you need to be pragmatic with the way you're looking at these things. Also, if something might be struggling, is it something that does need high humidity and you've put it somewhere on its own in a very dry house? These are things that you're going to need to start looking at, especially because I know not a lot of people are going to want to run a humidifier. And again, for the people that have been here long enough, I'm still running a dehumidifier. Just to put that into context, by the way, in case you were curious, I have got a standard bucket that the dehumidifier empties into in this space. Getting to the warmer, more humid months of the year, and at the moment that entire bucket from empty is filling up within a day and a half. There are certain days where I'm just like, oh, squeaky bum moment. I'm just like, did I remember to empty that bucket, or am I going to go into the conservatory and is the floor going to be flooded because the dehumidifier is just doing the mostest at this particular moment in time? So, sorry, aside there, but funny story for some people. But yeah, you need to really start paying attention to humidity. Sometimes there's going to be a trade-off. So we're talking about bathrooms and kitchens. A lot of people assume, yes, there's going to be high humidity there. Maybe I don't have to group as many plants. Yes. But again, remember what those rooms might mean like in terms of a microclimate. So a bathroom might get a bit too cold at times, or a kitchen might also get super warm at other times, especially if you're constantly cooking in there. That means that you're going to need to make adjustments to the watering, whether up or down, for those specific plants. And let's talk about temperature and stability as well, because that is something that a lot of people tend to forget. And let me show you a plant actually that is very, very much influenced by temperature and stability. And I did a review on this plant and I will link it at the top of there. So this is a Paliscia Ming or an Aralia Ming. But this is a plant that, at least in my experience, is one that really cannot handle too much fluctuation in terms of temperature. And I lose a large chunk of these leaves every autumn and winter because this is just in my bathroom. My bathroom gets a bit too cold during that time of the year. This plant reacts to it. So that is something that you need to remember, is how stable is the conditions, whether it's humidity, light, or even something like temperature in the space that you're giving that plant. Again, there's a reason why I'm doing this video now in spring and summer, at least here for the Northern Hemisphere, is that this is a time where a lot of people may be buying some new plants or maybe getting a bit more active with their plant collection again, and they're kind of moving things around. You really need to be taking into consideration that you are doing things now in the ideal conditions. And a lot of us, myself included, struggle with the winter and autumn. If we start considering that even in the summer, I know it's bleak, but if you start making some of those adjustments and say, okay, you know what, you're going to be a bit unhappy here in the summer because, or I'm going to be a bit unhappy because I'm going to need to water you a bit more frequently, but I know that in the winter I don't have to move you. You're happy in your condition, you're stable in your condition, and the temperature stays the same. Perfect. You will probably like that little micro habitat in my house more than me trying to move you every time the season changes. And that does bring me nicely into, and I've touched on it at different times, seasonal shifts. Be aware of the seasonal shifts and what that might mean for the specific space that you're putting a plant into. Not just rooms, but the specific locations within rooms. So again, I'll give you a very specific example. So I've got a fireplace in my living room. So during the summer, it's a great place because it's just far enough from the light that it's not too bright. So anything that needs like a medium towards being okay with low light is absolutely stonking fantastic on top of my fireplace. Two reasons. One, obviously it's the spring and summer, I'm not going to be running my fireplace. And my fireplace technically has got one of those cassettes like wood burners or wood stoves, I think they're called, or stoves in America, I don't know. Can't remember exactly what the word is, but it can get really, really warm directly above. So this is on the mantle, potentially, of that fireplace. So those are going to be very extreme differences for those plants. So those plants are probably not going to get anywhere near that level of light in the autumn and winter because obviously there's less light hours. It's that bit further away from the window. That means that they probably aren't getting any light. And add on top of that, that obviously in the winter, if I'm kind of putting that wood burner on or the stove or the fireplace on all the time, there's going to be a lot of rising dry heat that's going to be happening underneath those plants. I know this is a massively extreme example, but you do need to think about that specific location within that room that you're putting that plant and just go, hopefully this shouldn't take you very long, by the way. If you've lived in your space for at least a few months or even a year, probably better if you've a year so you've experienced the seasons, you'll kind of know intrinsically and just go, oh no, yeah, no, that's going to be a problem in the winter. Do I put you there and then risk moving you in the winter to a better location, or do I find a better place to place you on? But why do plants behave differently within your space that they might do in my space? So there's several things. Obviously, we touched on a lot of different topics here, but in the specific space that you've got your specific plant, and I'm not even talking about your care now, your airflow might be different from mine or anybody else's that you see online. Your airflow might be different. Your light levels specifically to that location might be different. Your humidity might be different. The constant and the temperature and the less amount of fluctuations, the better in your space might be different than mine. And obviously, there is something to be said about I'm growing in kind of near, like what a lot of people say, they're just like, yeah, but your conditions are very different from ours. Yes, I'm aware. My conservatory is more or less just like a massive like walk-in glorified terrarium at this point, really, in a way, because it would serve the same effects. I've got my own set of issues that I need to deal with, even in what you might consider an ideal space. Like my windows, I need to like deal with both the ceilings and the other windows because I still haven't been able to get that window paint off basically. But this gets way too bright in the summer. I need to have all of the shade cloths in here. It doesn't look great. But I'm making adjustments and I need to kind of bear in mind what is happening within my space. But even here, a plant growing up here on the top shelves, which is getting a lot more of that bright light and possibly some of that dryness that's happening at the very top, isn't going to be the same as something that's right down at the bottom of my shelves there, even if I've got grow lights, even if all of these things, because for example, this shelf, right behind it, there's a radiator by the wall. So that gets a bit of heat in the summer, in the winter, but it also gets some dryness that's happening from that radiator. Also, the light level down here, unless I've got grow lights growing or kind of on, is shockingly bad. But, and this is where the adjustment happens with the seasonality as well, because those grow lights are on for 12, 14, 16 hours in the winter. In the summer though, because there's so much more light and it's so much brighter in here, because there's less clouds in the UK and all of these things, those grow lights either need to be dimmed down, if you've got a dimmer, or adjusted in terms of timing. So they might not be burning for the same amount of hours, they might be at the same level if you can't dim your grow lights, but they're going to be running for less hours. And those are the adjustments that you need to make for seasonality as well. So this is how you need to start adjusting. Same thing goes for like grouping plants together or the humidity level. Like, am I doing this correctly for this plant and is it going to be okay year round? Or do I just need to remember that, you know what, in the winter I need to tweak some of these conditions in order for that plant to remain happy? So one of the last things I want you to do, and this is a little bit of a task to do after the video, it sounds silly, but humor me, because actually you might find a bit of use of this. Like grab your phone if you like to take notes on your phone, or grab a pen and paper and do this, or even if you don't want to write anything down, just mentally go around your house and just walk. Walk around your house slowly and look at all of the different places that you've already got plants. I'm not even going to talk about places that you, and even if you know that you've got a space somewhere that you want to get your plant in, and just walk around and have a look around. First thing I want you to do is look at the light levels. Look at the light levels that are happening in those existing spaces and in those potentially new plant locations. Note what the light is happening. Just walk around. Is it a bright zone? Is it a dim zone? Also, think about the seasonality. Like, what's this specific place going to look like in the spring and summer versus the winter? Walk around and see which ones are your dry zones or your humid zone, where you've got plants together. What location is that? Is it bathroom? Is it kitchen? Is it somewhere else? And then also look at the stable versus fluctuating locations in your house. Is somewhere that's always going to be stable for humidity and temperature, or is it going to fluctuate throughout the year? So as a bit of a final thought, the moment that you start looking at your space the way that your plants might perceive it, that is the moment where you stop struggling with it and stop trying to force a plant that isn't really going to be happy in that location, and just placing them straight into a location that is as perfect as you can get it for them, and you don't have to fight their nature anymore. And I think there is something to be said about that. But yes, I'm curious to know, do you do any of this? Is it something that you take into consideration before adding a plant? I know people are becoming a bit more conscious of the plants when they bring them into the space, especially if they don't have huge collections anymore and they're bringing only a few plants in here and there or moving plants around. We have got that extra brain power and capacity now to kind of do that little walk around that I was talking about and just take note so that we know what we're getting into before we get into it, if that makes sense. But yes, really curious to see if you guys are doing any of this or if this is something that you're willing to try. Let me know in the comments down below. But yes, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.